Hello, New Zealand. I'm Bob McCoskrie. Welcome to Straight Talk. This is our 28th episode, and there are just 5 sleeps to go before Election Day. Although apparently about 600,000 of us have already voted. Maybe that's one of you. Anyway, let's get straight into it. We've got a lot to talk about tonight, and so let's introduce the handsome-looking panel tonight. Unfortunately, we got late notice from Christine that she had a migraine headache. So, Christine, get well soon. Hopefully have her back next week. But firstly, down to the South Island, to the 2 Christchurch boys. Hello, Bruce. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Bob.
Very good. And Michael Reid, have you voted yet, Michael?
No, Bob. I was waiting for you to tell me, but you didn't.
And Brendan has been in Australia. We actually let him back in the country, which I'm surprised at. Brendan, how are you? Good trip?
Yeah, great trip. I can also confirm tonight I will not be forming a coalition with anybody on Saturday night. So just in case anyone was wondering, I'm going to be happening.
Your wife will be pleased to hear that. And from up north, Dr. Shree Trotter, how are you?
Pretty good. I'm just hoping.
Oh, we've still got that terrible line from up north. We'll try and get that fixed. If you can ask Perry if he can do anything else to clear that line for you, Sheree, we've got to get fibre up there for you. And Dr. Ate Moala, how are you?
Very good, thank you, Bob.
Okay, now important announcement. Panellist Ala Pomalele and husband Joe welcomed little Samuel just over 2 weeks ago, a wee healthy 7-pounder Tongan. So our love and congratulations to Ala and Joe. We'll see her back in the new year. All right, image of the day, team, is this cartoon. I was going to show it last week with Winston Peters, but I thought I might not. But this is a cartoon. It's Chris Hipkins saying, "Vote for the Nats and you'll get Winston in again. Last time he gave you us, and you won't want that again." And Grant Robertson to the right says, "Oh dear, he's better when he avoids the truth," which is probably true. Video of the week we found was a employment company in the United States. And the video is entitled, "I Want to Work for a Woke Company."
When I grow up, I want to work for a woke company, like super woke. When I grow up,
I want to be hired based on what I look like,
rather than my skills.
I want to be judged by my political beliefs.
I want to get promoted
Based on my chromosomes.
When I grow up,
I want to be offended by my coworkers
And walk around the office
on eggshells
and have my words policed
by HR.
Words like
grandfather,
peanut gallery,
long time no see.
no can do.
When I grow up,
I want to be obsessed with emotional safety
and do workplace sensitivity training
all day long. When I grow up, I want to climb the corporate ladder.
just by following the crowd.
I want to be a conformist. I want to weaponize my pronouns. What are pronouns?
It's time to grow up and get back to work. Introducing the #1 woke-free job board in America, redballoon.work.
There we are. So if you're looking for work, go to that one. They're looking for the wokesters. Now, with the election just 5 sleeps away, team, interesting fact of the week, and this is courtesy of the facts.nz. And this image shows the number of new parties that have entered Parliament since we used MMP, a new party without a sitting or a previous MP. Yep, none of them. All 6 parties that have entered New Zealand Parliament for the first time under MMP have had a sitting or previous MP. It was ACT, United Future, Greens, Progressive, the Māori Party, Mana. They all had previous or ex-MPs. No party has ever made it into MMP Parliament without a sitting or previous MP. 107 parties have tried to, but they haven't been able to, and 3 parties have just fallen short of the 5% party vote. Christian Coalition, which actually had ex-MP Graham Lee from National, New Zealand First in 2008 with Winston, and the Conservatives almost got there with 4%. But there have been no new parties in our Parliament since 12 years ago, which with the Mana Party. And of all the parties that are standing for this election, not currently in Parliament at the moment, New Zealand has 2 former MPs, that's Nationals Alfred Naro and Paul Adams from United Future, and Democracy NZ has Matt King. So there's your interesting fact for today. Now, just before we look at New Zealand politics, the world is focused on the Middle East, and we're privileged because we've got Dr. Cherie Trotter, who is co-founder of the Holocaust and Anti-Semitism Foundation and the Indigenous Coalition for Israel. And Cherie, I know it's been a pretty stressful day for you. We were keen just to hear just briefly what you've been doing today, what you've been dealing with, and what you think of the political response in New Zealand.
Sure. Okay. Well, I'll try and speak briefly. There's a lot to say, but it actually. My phone, which has alerts of rocket attacks, started just pinging, and there was this massive rocket attacks from thousands from Gaza. It was a huge onslaught. And then this by Hamas, and you've probably seen this in the news, but Hamas penetrating into Israel and going into Israeli communities, into homes, and basically slaughtering whoever they found, children and old people. Seeing the most horrific images and being dragged around the streets. She's lifeless, she's naked, just about naked. And I actually have a New Zealand contact who's connected to this woman. And so community, also Christian community.
Cherie, still have that really bad line. Could you just turn your image off maybe, and then at least we can still hear your report?
That's a good idea. We'll try turning the image off. Did you hear any of that?
You just cut out on the second half of it, unfortunately. So we just heard about the horrific scenes that were happening in family homes, etc.
Yes.
Yeah.
It has been. Can you hear? I'll carry on. So what we've seen is this just a horrendous attack. It's unprecedented for Israel. This kind of attack. It's very different from previous kinds of war, which has been more rocket fire. So this kind of brutal attack, it's more an ISIS-style attack. And so if we're talking about the response from our leaders, it has been abysmal. Nanaia Mahuta put out a very lame response many hours after it began, after other international leaders had come out and condemned Hamas, and we had this very weak response from Nanaia Mahuta, our Foreign Minister. Some of the other political leaders then began to weigh in and gave their responses. So we had a good response from Christopher Luxon. We had a very comprehensive response from David Seymour. Actually, the first leader to come out was Alfred Naro of the New Zealand Party. He kind of led comments there, and
that's got worse. I think
so
if we
did condemn us, and so that was important.
Okay, yeah, sorry, you were still dropping out. If we get a change of government, I'm going to put down fibre for the North as key priority number one in the first 100 days. So let's see if we can, because it's nice to be able to see you as well. But look, I think we've had a few people just comment through saying prayers for Israel, and even some of our Australian watchers saying Australia stands with Israel. So we certainly need to really lift up that area and pray for a strong response, that's for sure. Okay, team, let's move on and closer to home. And we have an election coming up on Saturday, which kind of pales in insignificance with what's going on in the Middle East, it feels. But here's the average of the polls from 4 key polling companies. And along the bottom is the average of all of them. So Nat's on 37.3, Labor on 26.9, ACT 9.2. This is if you average all the polls. Greens 12.7, Māori 2.8, New Zealand First 6.1, and the media are doing their best to talk up top, who are still just 2.3. But here's the interesting thing, team. A week after our interview with David Seymour, One News released a poll showing all the parties remaining consistent, but ACT dropping 2 points after that excellent interview that he had with us. And then a week after our interview with Winston Peters, which was slightly better, a Curia poll came out on Friday showing a substantial drop for ACT and New Zealand First getting a big bump. So panel, it's all your fault, or maybe David Seymour's. Actually, I got an email here from Ray. Is it Ray? Yeah, Ray. And he says, congratulations for a very successful Straight Talk series. And he talks about the fact that he wasn't too keen on David Seymour's interview and he liked Winston Peters' one. But at the end, he said, I found Straight Talk interviews are more civilised than those political reporters of TVNZ and TV3. Those interviews seem to favour mudslinging and controversy mongering. I salute your panel, who I see as knowledgeable intellectuals. So I rang Ray just to confirm that he was actually watching you guys, and he said, yeah, he was. So that was impressive. Anyway, team, I want your predictions, and I'm actually going to note them down because we're going to have a competition to see who is the most accurate, and next Monday we will be awarding a trophy to the one who gets the closest. So is anybody feeling confident about predicting what's happening in this upcoming election? Brendan, you look confident. What would you like to predict?
Not at all. I honestly, I thought I had it figured. Yeah. What's happened in the last week or so, man, it's just madness in the last couple of days. And also there are a couple of outlier events. I think what's going on in Israel is the response to that has potential to sort of shape things. So, yeah,
okay.
Gosh. But for me, I think one thing that I think is definitely going to happen is I think New Zealand First is going to climb more. And I think ACT is that gap is going to close between them and ACT.
Okay, well, sorry, I'm going to get a number off you. What's your number for ACT?
I'm going to say for ACT around 8.5%.
Okay, and for New Zealand First?
I think 7.5% for them.
Okay, and for National?
I think they'll get about 36%.
Yep. Labour?
I think they're going to actually get closer to 30%.
Oh.
And the Greens on 12% and Te Pāti Māori on 3.5%.
Okay. And Te Pāti Māori going to get in because they win a seat?
Yeah, obviously I think so. But I think percentage-wise they'll get about 3.5%.
Okay. Dr. Michael Reid, what's your predictions?
Okay, Bob, I reckon all the predictions that we've seen and the way the polls have been going, I think it's going to be a clear centre-right change of government. I think National will get 38%. I think Labor will get 26%. ACT, 8%. The Greens, 11%. New Zealand First, 9%. And Te Pāti Māori, 2%.
Okay.
And Bob, Labor has been, of course, loving saying that it's going to be close. That's their narrative. But it's not going to be close, I don't think. There might be a few surprises, there always are, but it's not going to be close. All the polls in the direction it's been heading, there's not going to be any surprise in the overall outcome. National is, I mean, Bishop's silly comments about a second election are just crazy. It's really just to scare people to say, if you want to change a government, you've got to give 2 ticks blue. So, but rather bizarre comment. But of course, then they're not being complacent. And they shouldn't be either, but they're coming out with some pretty strange statements there.
Okay, and I noticed you haven't got any of the minor parties or...
I think all the other parties combined, Bob, will be about 6%. They'll make up the difference.
Right, so that's 6%, yeah, okay. And Brendan, you didn't have any of the minor parties or Top getting there?
I'm like Michael. I think Top's definitely not going to get there. That is delusional stuff. I think the minor parties will make up the remainder of the vote, and it'll just be, sadly, it'll be spread across quite thinly across them.
Okay, Bruce.
Well, what can one say? National, I think, will get 36. Labor 25. ACT 9. New Zealand First 8. And I say 8 because I think David Seymour's criticism of Winston has worked against him, and it's increased votes for for Winston. He's lost votes to New Zealand First, I think.
Yep.
And Greens 11, Maori maybe 3.
Okay.
And the minor parties, the rest, of course.
Okay.
Labor could well
Ate-
continue to lose votes to the Greens.
Yep. Or they could stay home.
Yes, yes.
Ate.
National 40, Labour 26, X 8, Green 9, New Zealand First 8, Te Pāti Māori probably about 3. I'm still hoping that one of the minor parties will get in because over 200,000 people have not voted. So in the past election, and hopefully also that they might be able to get in through the regional electoral votes.
Okay. You want to tell us which party you want to predict, just to really make it exciting?
I think Manurewa, the guy Warren, he's very popular amongst it's always been a Labour.
For local, yep.
Yeah, so, but, he's done a lot of work with the community and he's quite popular. So I'm hoping that he'll get in. We just can't continue on as it is. It's disgusting. With
Do you think any of the minor parties will get above 5%? Or you're putting
I
it
think
on
we'll
the
spread
electorate
across. I'm sort of hoping more for, that they'll get in on the regional electoral votes.
Right, electorate vote. Okay. Cherie.
Well, this is completely random, really. But I'm going to say...
We're all guessing.
I'm going to say national... Yeah, it's just a guess. It's just a guessing game here. I'm going to say National 36, Labour 26, ACT Party 12, Green 9, New Zealand First 10, Te Pāti Māori 3, and I think the rest will go to the other parties.
Did you say New Zealand First 10?
I did.
Oh, okay. That's very high. That's the power of
I said random.
StraightTalk, is it?
Could be,
I'm not going to add up any of these and see if they're more than 100%, guys? Yeah. Okay.
It won't be.
Okay. And I'll just give you mine. 39% for National. I actually think Labour's is going to tank further because their voters just aren't going to come out. ACT are going to slip to 9. Greens will be on 10, and New Zealand First will be on 9, and Te Pāti Māori will be on 1.5. Okay. Right, so I've got them here, team, and next week we will be awarding a trophy to the luckiest political pundit who absolutely guessed what the outcome would be. So well done. Okay, so we got the predictions. Right, next topic, 10 reasons Labour's vote has halved. The Labour government was elected, you might remember, 3 years ago with 50% of the vote. But current opinion polls show that their vote could halve in this year's election, one of the biggest political plunges in political history. Now, left-leaning commentator Bryce Edwards has suggested 10 reasons for this. And here's the 10 reasons. Labour's handling of COVID, not the initial response when we didn't know what we were dealing with, but the subsequent lockdowns, the mandates and locking the borders for Kiwis to come home. Failure to deliver the promised transformation, for example, Kiwi Build mental health system. Thirdly, the economy, because we've spent $48 billion more annually than in 2017, but what do we have to show for it? Broken New Zealand. Voters say that public services like health, crime, education and transport have got worse since 2020. Failure on tax reform. They haven't done their capital gains and wealth taxes as they promised. Perception that Labor is arrogant and out of touch. Lack of clarity about what Labor believe in, because Hipkins did that policy bonfire like hate speech, but it upset their base. Labor's focus on woke politics instead of working class politics. You know, Labor became more associated with social issues such as gender, ethnicity, gender, social justice. Did I mention gender? Lots of money for consultants and gender. Labor's reinterpretation of the treaty, the Three Waters, co-governance, and finally integrity scandals, Stuart Nash, Michael Wood, Meka Whaitiri, and Kerry Allen, to just name a few. So question for the panel, which do you agree with, which don't you agree with, and are there any missing? And I'm going to start with you, Bruce, because I've already heard that you think there are maybe some missing. So according to this list, Which do you agree with and which don't you agree with?
Well, generally speaking, I think all of them are real, and I think I'm not sure whether Bryce has those in a particular order, and whether that's what he means, but they're all very reasonable. But one of the things I find interesting is that a number of the points come under what I would call the heading of the culture war. We don't hear much use of that phrase in the New Zealand media. I'm not quite sure why, but because the culture war is real. And some of his points, I think, come under what we might call the culture war. For example, Labor's focus on woke politics instead of on working class politics. That's a radical change. Although it seems quite a number of New Zealanders haven't caught up with the nature of that change. The Broken New Zealand issue, I think, is a consequence of the culture war as well. And the perception that Labor is arrogant and out of touch is characteristic, well, it certainly seems to be, well, it is characteristic of the progressive mindset that insists on what we've come to call woke politics. And it's along with that is the radical interpretation of the treaty. They all come out of that same kind of understanding of the need for a progressive revolution, which underpins the whole changing structure as far as the culture war is concerned. The issues of the economy, which I think is probably the big one, is always the case, and Labor has just simply been incompetent and delivering on that. So it seems obvious to me.
Okay. Let's go to Cherie next. And were there ones that you agreed with and any that you disagreed with?
Well, I agree that, a lot of these points are spot on, really. And one that I would point out or highlight, I think, is with Labor's handling of COVID. I noticed in Bryce's article, he didn't mention the mandates and all of the reaction against the mandates and the parliamentary protest. And when we went to that film the other night and our phone kept beeping with alerts about rocket attacks, we were actually at that River of Freedom movie, which is going around. I think that's what it's called. It was interesting to see it again because it was a reminder of what a traumatic event that was for New Zealand. And, some interesting things we were reminded of was the fact that it was largely, the survey that was done showed it was a largely Labour Party group down there. There was a high proportion of Māori down there. And, these are Labour voters. And so I think this is a key factor that media has ignored, is the impact that the mandates had, that parliamentary protest, and the way that has turned a lot of Labour's people against them. I could say more about that, but it's probably enough for now.
Okay. And somebody just commented, I noticed they said about, no, it's Sound of Freedom, but no, you are referring to River of Freedom, which of course is the movie about the parliamentary protest from the angle of the parliamentary protest, which the media never reported. It's a fascinating watch, whatever side of that debate you're on. Okay, let's continue to go. And Ate, which of those do you think were the downfall? Ate, I still think the Labor's handling of COVID, I mean, it was actually Labor's handling of COVID that gave them that 50% majority thrashing in 2020, wasn't it? I mean, everybody was applauding them. Jacinda could do no wrong. And then suddenly it all crashed and burned, didn't it?
Yeah, it was good that people woke up because, as Cherie said, it was disgusting what Labor had done with handling of that and with the what happened in Parliament, just their arrogance, and not only Māori but lots of Pacific who have been voting Labor was just disgusted with what they've done. And it's good that this River of Freedom documentary has come out. It's the right time that hopefully will remind people of the nightmare that it was. So I think that's a major thing. And of course the economy, and what Labor have done is just created a huge mess. And not only in the economy, but it has broken New Zealand, divided families. broken promises, and it just continue on. And then, of course, their woke stuff with all these laws that they have passed. For Pacific, many of them, majority of Pacific people still believe in God, and what Labour has done is absolutely contrary to our Pacific beliefs in God, in marriage, in abortion, and all of that. So I hope that people will wake up and not believe the lie that Labour has continued to push, because the line at the moment is, if you vote national, that's what Labour is saying to the Pacific people, if you vote national, you might lose your entitlements, which is an absolute lie. But hopefully people will remember what they've done. Thanks.
Well, Ate, this is one thing that I wonder if both Bryce Edwards but also the media underestimate, is that they paint a nice picture about the abortion law, the euthanasia, the conversion therapy, the birth certificates. But what they don't understand is that deep down, it actually causes division. It is destructive. And as I say, I believe Labor's vote is actually going to decrease from what they're polling at, because it happened in 2008 when Helen Clark was Prime Minister and she was accused of social engineering, and the Pacifica community just stayed home. They didn't want to go and vote for any other party, but they couldn't vote for Labor, so they just stayed home. Do you think that's going to happen?
Yeah, you're saying that that the media has probably forgotten. They haven't forgotten. They are deliberately lying to the people. They know what they're doing, and they are lying to the people. So hopefully, what I'm saying to Pacific people is that it's not just national. There are other Christian parties that they will consider. And if over 200,000 of Christians who haven't voted, if they come and vote, it will make a big difference, over 5%. But, the lie of the media is that they may have not considered that. They are deliberately lying to the people.
Okay, Brendan, do you think that list sums it all up, or do you think we're onto something and there are some missing social effects that they haven't taken into account?
I think there's definitely some missing effects. I mean, when you're in a particular ideological echo chamber yourself, you're not necessarily going to realise what's going on outside of that. And maybe there's things you just don't pick up on. Despite the fact that I think Bryce Edwards is actually one of our better commentators in New Zealand. But I think there's some things he's definitely missed here, or maybe there's something that's a bit verboten that he couldn't talk about. Was I felt that the media funding deal, I think that was a real big knife in the back, a real own goal when they started funding the media, and that thing just hung around, and people still talking about it now. And I think there is a real sense now that effectively the media and Labor are like institutional bedfellows, and it's just created massive distrust and problems for them. I think Hipkins initially showed promise, like he was going to perhaps move in a slightly different direction from Ardern, but then all of a sudden it was like the wheels came off and he just didn't really know what he stood for. And it was, just there was a whole lot of bad decisions, a whole string of them back to back. But the one thing I do wonder about, I think it's not on the list, and I feel like maybe he's talking all around it in places, is Ardern. Ardern really tanked the party before she left. And then when she left, I think the tanking got worse, because initially people were like, oh, okay, so she's, it's rough, it's tough, she's had enough, she wants to stop, as she said, and spend time with the family and get married. And then after that, she's gone on, she's around the world, she's at Harvard, she's doing everything else. She's certainly got a whole lot of things that are occupying her time. So all of a sudden it starts to look a bit hollow. The fact that I'm departing because it's just too much and I haven't got anything left in the tank. Well, it seems that she has got stuff left in the tank. So I think she really dragged the party down. And then, as I said, I think that came back again for another round once it became clear that she actually had a bit more gas in the tank than what she'd actually said when she left. Yeah.
I saw the media saying, why isn't Labor putting Jacinda out more in front? I think you've just said what the answer to that is. I was fascinated to see that they brought Helen Clark out as well. I'm not sure if that's going to help the polling. Michael, I'm sure you've got an opinion on that one.
Well, I have. I just want to disagree with Brendan on them starting to look hollow. I think they looked hollow right from the get-go, Brendan. And I'm not convinced that Bryce Edwards is left-leaning. Bob, he may be, but I've heard quite a lot of him lately. And a bit like Chris Trotter, these people might have had left-leaning sympathies, but they've certainly changed. And perhaps that old saying's true, that a a Conservative is a Liberal that's been mugged by reality. I don't know, possibly. But I certainly agree with Cherie too. As an historian, these parliamentary protests, Bob, are on a level, and it's a debatable point for historians of the future, but looking back on what happened there is surely on a par, if not even greater, than the waterfront strike of 1951 and the Springbok tour of 1981. I mean, they were just a huge disruption.
Yeah.
And I agree with Cherie. I think the impact of that, that people's memories live long, and they will not forgive Labor with its mandates and the arrogance with which the COVID thing was handled, notwithstanding there were obviously some positives there. But look, I think Bryce's list is actually pretty good. It's comprehensive. I wouldn't like to rank them. I'm not sure if he's got them in some sort of order there, but
no, I don't think so. Just a list of
yeah,
two,
no, I don't think so.
got.
But the failure to deliver on promised transformation, I think of Phil Twyford, who was a motor mouth really, and he was very prominent early on, but he just faded away when the Kiwi Build thing fell over, of course. The economy, the profligate waste in the public service, which, to its credit, ACT has been good at pointing out. The broken New Zealand, of course, the tax reform you mentioned. I think for me, though, the perception that Labor is arrogant and out of touch, these are champagne socialists. There are very few of the old working class, strong-armed sort of Labor people represented in the present Labor caucus. There's lots of disgruntled activists. It's a real mishmash, and I think from 2020, Bob, it's all been downhill, actually. There's only one way a party that gets 50% under an MMP is going to go, and it's been all downhill. I agree with the others that have commented about the woke politics. Labor's a victim of its own hype and naivety. Remember Jacinda Ardern's relentless positivity? That just evaporated, of course. But when you get 50%, I suppose you can sort of be so arrogant. But yeah, most certainly. And the radical reinterpretation of the treaty is a big issue. I think it's the elephant in the room, really. And it's a pretty major component of race relations generally, which people are concerned about. What is the direction? Where's it going to go? Will we have more and more agencies set up for Māori? And what is the impact of that on the rule of law and free speech and, one person, one vote democracy? There's massive issues there. And so I think it's a good list. But yeah, and the integrity scandals, of course. Yeah, that's been a pretty sad story for Labor. And I just go back to what I said before. I think they're going to get really thumped, actually. I don't think it's going to be close. National says that to try and scare people to get out and vote, of course, but that's part of the tactic. Yeah.
Okay. Cherie, can I just come to you? I'm just interested in that one, with your Māori heritage. Do you think that the issues around the treaty have been done wrong or communicated wrong, too fast? They just haven't taken the public along with them.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think Labor has not been transparent in what their agenda is with the treaty, with He Puapua. Obviously, they were not transparent because Winston Peters, it was hidden from him, according to Winston. But it sort of leaked out through the media, and nobody really understood what that was all about. And I would say I would tie that to their woke politics as well, to their agenda for gender and some of the other things. I think this is one of the things with Labor is that it's like they took their chance. They got a majority, and then they tried to push through so much of their so-called progressive agenda, but they did it very quietly so that most of the country had no idea what was going on. I remember explaining to some people about the abortion bill and how extreme it was, and they were shocked. They had no idea that this was happening. And so I sort of see those as connected. And would just also add about the culture war. The reason we don't have a culture war, I think, is because our media is captured by the one culture that the Labor government has pushed. So there's no war in mainstream because it's just one ideology that's been imposed on us.
Bob,
we also see this in foreign policy.
Yeah.
Can I just agreeing with what Sheree said there? I think the Parker Posey rally, I think that was a real big moment. I wrote about that at the time. There was something shifted in the public consciousness. They realised that the government was possibly not what they thought it was. It suddenly got very extreme, and they're on the side of the thugs. And the other thing I think too is with the co-governance issue is it's not so much the issue, but it's the way they went about effectively accusing anybody who wanted to have a conversation and a point of dissent of being a racist. And so it's become, I think, like Michael said, it's the elephant in the room. A whole lot of people who don't want to speak about it because they feel they'll be accused of racism and they don't like being called racists. And so they're quietly sort of voting with their feet around that issue, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Somebody had a comment? No? No. Yeah, go on, Bruce.
Can I just comment on something that Michael was saying about it? I thought it was interesting you referred to the waterfront strike. The waterfront strike was interesting because it was a local affair. The rest of the world didn't have much to do with it. And so that was a different kind of issue, but a big issue for us, of course. Then there was the Springbok problem. That was it seemed to me to be a simple issue of what people thought justice is. And that was pretty clear-cut too. But the kind of problem we have now, which whether we call it the culture wars or whatever we want to call it, is really attending to something that's worldwide and it's influencing New Zealand certainly, and it's a new way of thinking about what it means to be human. And that kind of progressive thinking, which underpins that, we'll call it progressive for want of a better word, which underpins that, the Labor Party has absorbed. And I think people are slowly starting to put the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle together, and they can see that there is a real revolution going on in the culture, and it is upsetting our order and our understanding of what it means to be our democratic process. There's so many connected things, and it's just taken us a while to catch on. And I think we are slowly catching on. I think that's one of the reasons. Even it might be just a kind of a psychological understanding that people haven't got clearly in their minds, that one of the reasons why Labor is going down, because they're starting to see there is something really deep and profound going on in the culture. At least I hope that's the case.
Okay, let's just check out. We've got comments coming through at 1,000 miles an hour, which is why I'm a little distracted, team. So it's good you've just been talking. Let's have a look at them first. Joanne Francis says, Straight Talk tonight, not up on YouTube yet. It is, apparently, because I'm getting comments coming through from it. So just check under the live tab. Craig says, who is Bob voting for again? Well, interesting question, Craig. If you go to bobmccoskrie.com, you'll see a McBlog on that today. Very important. Ivy says, so shocking what's happening in Israel, just terrible. Leslie says, I'd love to hear Sheree better because she speaks sense. Well, we are hearing you nice and clear now, Sheree, so that is lovely. Jamie says, will you be going live on election day? No, but we will be here the Monday after to analyse what's happened and for me to get my trophy for being the most accurate political pundit, of course. Now, here's an important one. Rex has given his predictions for the number of seats, but then he's also given his predictions for the quarterfinals. New Zealand apparently going to beat Ireland, so Rex will hold you to that. Craig says, I think rugby is a very important topic the panel needs to address it with some urgency, but they seem to brush it under the carpet like ACT brush off New Zealand first. Good point. Charlotte says, bribing the media with taxpayer money. This government has destroyed New Zealand and it will be forever tainted. That's by Teresa as a biological woman. Well done, Teresa. Renee says, spot on, Shree. You got a lot of supporters today, Shree. John says, Labor's big issue for me was the past, trying to bring the past into the present and many having issues on it. Learn from the past, live in the present, aiming for the future. And one more for your fan club. Absolutely, Sheree. The key to the truth and range of perspectives being discussed is a free and independent media. Right, let's continue on. Next topic. The day after we interviewed Winston, New Zealand first released a new policy. And they have said that they will put an end to the use of conscience votes in Parliament and return democracy to the people. They've always believed that important decisions that change the social fabric of our country forever should not be left up to temporarily empowered politicians to decide, and that any legislation being passed in Parliament that would normally be considered a conscience issue would have to have a referendum clause. Any referenda would be binding and voted on at the same time as general elections. So examples of this would be the gay marriage law, the anti-smacking law, euthanasia, which actually euthanasia is an example of how it would work, abortion law, drinking age, legalising cannabis, Easter trading. The only problem with this policy for me is that it would completely kill value your vote because we wouldn't have the voting record of the politicians. But I'm interested to ask the panel, good policy or bad policy? Should we leave it to 120 politicians to determine the social direction of the country, or should we make it referendum and leave it to the people on these conscience type issues? So I think I'll start with Ate on this one. Ate, what do you think? What do you prefer? Do you prefer politicians doing it or referendum?
I think referendum has been such a waste of money. So many petitions have gone in referendum. While it seemed to be a good idea, but when you look at the track record of them, so many of them hasn't got the numbers, and I think it's a waste of money.
So you're happy for the politicians to pass extreme abortion laws?
No, we're not happy about that. But we are the one who vote them in, and to end up having spent some more money to do referendums because people will continue to lobby anyway. I definitely do not believe that we should have this extreme abortion law, transgender, all the stuff we've talked about. I'm not happy about that.
Okay. Cherie, what do you think? Would you prefer conscience votes by politicians or referendum?
Well, I like the idea of a referendum just so that it is more representative of the people, but I hear what Ate's saying about the cost of it and the impracticality of it and the fact that at the end of the day, it might not shift things. But, when you think of the way this last government has just pushed through so much, so much radical legislation, there needs to be some way to put the brakes on that kind of thing. So I guess that's not a very good answer.
Okay. Actually, somebody where is it? Oh, somebody just put a statement saying it would need to be binding. Well, that is part of the policy, that the referendum would be binding. So you wouldn't get the farce that we had with the anti-smacking law, 87% saying no, and yet the John Key just ignored the referendum. Bruce, what do you like? I'm predicting you don't like referendum, eh?
Well, doubtless referenda are useful sometimes, like in the legalisation of cannabis, where you can actually accumulate hard data, and you can get hard data and compare it, and that can be persuasive. But as a normal procedure, I'm not enthusiastic, although I must say, maybe out of the corner of my mouth, it does have one thing in its favour. It tends to short-circuit the decision-making of a politicised bureaucracy. But I suspect the desire for referenda is driven by the decay of trust by many voters and the MPs. Representative government isn't working as they suspect it would and hoped it would. And another reason I'm a bit hesitant about referenda as well is we tend to get the government we deserve. In the rush of blood to the nation's head, we voted in the last government, which was obviously going to make a mess of things, as Michael told us, and it did. And it's that rush of blood to the national head that worries me if we were to replace conscience votes with referenda. A conscience vote is quite a costly thing to make, and it nearly always has to be well considered. I'm not sure, in spite of New Zealand First telling us, that all topics of referenda will be promoted to New Zealand to ensure robust discussion, education and understanding. Well, really? And I can't see how the decision-making process will be enhanced by referenda generally, unless there is, as I suggested, hard data involved.
Okay. Michael, what do you like, referendum or conscience
Yeah,
votes?
well, Bob, I think it's got obvious appeal, at least superficial appeal. The idea that, it's not 120 politicians who are mostly whipped along party lines. I think people would mostly sort of accept that principle that it is good. But I agree with what the others have said, really. It's a massive logistical exercise, cost a lot of money. One good thing about it, I think it would stir up debate on the ground amongst people, because the power is put back in their hands. But I think it's much better, really, to just elect the right people in the first place, people who will truly be representative and have courage to stand up rather than just be whipped. Because I suspect a lot of whipping is actually going on in the parliamentary process, even though it's a conscience vote. It's pros and cons, Bob, but I think possibly it would be a very expensive exercise, and for what great outcome, I'm not sure.
Well, I think you only need to look at value your vote to see just how much conscience votes are being whipped in parties, eh?
Yeah.
Okay, Brendan, I'm a bit worried here because I've got 4 people going against me because I'm a big believer in referendum. So please help me out.
No, I can't, Bob. I'm with Arte and also with Cherie as well. I'm going to hedge my bets here with the 2 lovely ladies because I think no. Let me tell you, I think Arte's right. It is. I think what would happen is it would cost a lot of money and it would slow down governance because everything would grind to a halt every time. And also, in actual fact, as we've seen, there's no guarantee that you're actually. I mean, it's hard enough to get 120 properly informed people. How the heck are we going to get 4 million or so properly informed people? And I think it's a utopian idea. In theory, it sounds good, but where I agree with Cherie is there does need to be some reform of the system. And I suspect what would probably happen anyway is that there would be parties would all of a sudden, they would just become party issues. So they would take the word conscience out of it. And then you've got this interesting question, well, what qualifies as a conscience issue? So I think the kind of reforms that we need are things like an upper and a lower house. And I also think, again, that single transferable vote so that you could get greater representation of views in the actual house. I think that would be a much better way to go.
Okay, I'll let you get away with that, Brendan, because that would be my alternative to referendum. Because, look, I know for a fact that those politicians go in and vote on a lot of those conscience votes, having not even thought about it, just too busy to even consider a lot of the evidence, especially in some of the detailed stuff, especially like the amendments that were being passed through on euthanasia and abortion. I mean, you heard it yourself last week. Winston Peters admitted that all those SOPs on abortion, somebody was doing the voting on behalf of all the New Zealand First MPs, just assuming their vote. So that's a huge issue. The proxy vote problem. Go and look at the abortion debate. Yeah.
How many people had P beside their vote, which means they've handed their vote to another MP to vote on their behalf.
Yeah. So therefore, I believe in the common sense of the New Zealand people, and I saw that evidenced in both the smacking law and the cannabis referendum. Unfortunately, you win some and you lose some. We lost the euthanasia one, but look, there was a poll just out before gay marriage was passed, which actually showed that more people were against it than were for it. It freaked Louisa Wall out at the time, front page of the New Zealand Herald, and they immediately accused misinformation and scaremongering. But yeah, personally, I'm a big believer in the common sense of the people versus 120 temporarily elected politicians. So sorry, team, you've all been sacked as panelists for Straight Talk. Thanks for your time.
Hold on. Let's have a binding referendum with the panel. Yeah. We'll just see how that
goes. Okay. Right. Does anybody want to make a final comment about that before we go on to the next topic?
Why don't you just ask people to vote for the right people, to put the right people in, and stop wasting more money doing a referendum?
Yep. Okay, let's touch on the elephant in the room again because, like I said, 5 sleeps to go. We hear about things like the wasted vote and voting strategically, but we also hear about voting on principle and for a party that aligns with our values, irrespective of whether they may get in or not. And so I want to ask the panel what's their advice to you, the audience, as you prepare to vote this weekend, when you're thinking about voting on principle, on the wasted vote, etc. Just while they're thinking about their answer, I'm just going to show this short clip again from the little explanation we did on the wasted vote and how it works in our parliamentary system, because a lot of people still don't understand it. Have a watch.
In 2020, when we voted, here was the final percentage vote count. Labour, 50%, National, 25.6%, Green Party, 7.9%, ACT, 7.6%, Māori Party, 1.2%, New Zealand First, 2.6%, the Opportunities Party, 1.5%, New Conservative, 1.5%, Advance NZ, 1%, Legalised Cannabis Party, 0.5%, One Party, 0.3%, Vision New Zealand, 0.1%. So let's pretend that there is no wasted vote. There's no 5% threshold, etc. Let's show all of those parties in our parliament based on their total vote. Now, Labour got 50%, which in a 120-seat parliament is 60 seats. Easy to see and work out, eh? National got 25.6%, so they get 25.6% of the 120 seats, which is about 31 seats. And so it goes. New Zealand First got 2.6%, which is about 3 seats. New Conservative got 1.5%, which is about 2 seats. But unfortunately for New Zealand First, the Opportunities Party, New Conservative, Advance NZ, Legalised Cannabis, One Party and Vision NZ, they didn't meet the required 5% or win an electorate seat. You'll note there the Māori Party only got 1.2% of the vote, so they didn't reach 5% either. But they won an electorate seat, Waiariki. So they qualify for Parliament because of that. But all the other parties below 5%, their votes are removed or wasted. They don't get any seats, and all their votes go with them. So there's our Parliament. But now there's 8% of the seats that are empty, 10 seats. Who gets those seats? Remember that Labour got 50% of the total vote, so out of 120 seats, that's 60 seats. But because 8% of votes were discarded, Labour gets a bonus, 50% of the wasted vote seats. Yep, half of those 10 seats. So Labour were bumped up by 5 seats to 65 seats. That's actually more than 50%. It's now 54%. But that's the effect of votes being wasted or being disqualified. But they weren't the only party to benefit. National got 25.6% of the vote, around 31 seats. They were bumped up to 33. Greens, ACT and Māori Party all received additional seats because of the removal of those wasted votes. Okay, so that's how the system works, whether we like it or not. They say that democracy isn't perfect, but it's the best of the systems, although I agree with you, Brendan. Single transferable vote, where if your party doesn't get in, then you have a second chance or second preference. I really like that idea, and I like the upper house. But Brendan, kick us off. What's your advice to audiences as they prepare to vote this weekend when they're thinking about this whole vexed issue?
I'd say 3 things quickly. Number 1 is vote on principle, principle, principle. You can't go wrong. If you vote according to principle, follow your conscience and make sure it's well informed, though, as well, not just feelings. Number 2 is don't ever be scared into voting a particular way. So some instances where if you don't vote for us, a bad outcome will happen. Look, if a party instinctually doesn't align with your principles and your conscience is saying this isn't a good party, but I better do this because I'm afraid, I would say that's not a good way to vote. And lastly, I think is that look at the list. And what I mean by that is you might see a party that's got either a really compelling and charismatic leader, but the list that they will bring into party with them, some of the higher ranking MPs are not so good at all. Vice versa, the leader might be okay, or you don't think much of the leader, but the list actually has some really good quality character-driven candidates who will come in with that party. So looking at the list, I think, is a helpful thing to do. Okay.
Michael, what's your advice?
Yeah, first thing, Bob, is to actually vote. Make sure you do vote. To participate in democracy is never wasted. Universal suffrage, one person, one vote, and a secret ballot is denied to millions of people around the world. So to get out there and actually vote is the first thing. Second thing, voting for a minor party according to conscience and principle. That's never wasted, as Brendan's just explained to us. Being true to yourself and one's values is really, really important. And I think if you do vote for a minor party, it's really signalling to the system that the two-party stranglehold that we've had for around 90-odd years is being challenged. And your vote is, in one sense, representing a wider democracy than what the result might suggest. So, and the third thing is, and I've said this before on Straight Talk, politics is about compromise. Principles really important, of course, but we need to vote pragmatically and understand the system strategically as well. And National's certainly been playing to this. They say if you want to change the government, 2 ticks National. And, that's the bottom line, I suppose. But principle, it's never wasted, Bob. I just want to make that point. I mean, how you explained it in your graphic there is true. That's the bottom line. That's how it works. But everyone that votes, that's the system. Everyone that has a vote is participating in democracy. And as I said a moment ago, that is denied to so many millions of people. So it's a privilege and we should get out there and vote.
Okay, Cherie, your advice?
Well, I agree with what everyone else has said. I would just add to it that you could see it as a valid principle to vote for the lesser of evils. So you can actually combine those two ideas, vote pragmatically, vote strategically, but your principle could be that you are trying to minimise the worst outcomes or vote for a better outcome or vote for the lesser of evils. That could be seen as a principle. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay. Bruce, your advice?
Well, I agree with nearly everything that's been said. I'm not sure how to avoid stating the obvious, but I agree with Michael. Voting is important, but it's also important to be an informed voter, know why you're voting and what you're voting for. And clearly, voting on principle is not going to disadvantage the minor parties. The more people who vote on principle is probably going to increase the number of votes to the minor party. And although I'm not a fan of MMP, I don't really mind the way the so-called wasted votes are reallocated. It seems to be quite a rational way to go about doing it. But it's important that we don't be intimidated and compromise on the basis of some kind of intimidation, but we understand that we're voting in a way that we're clear about. It seems pretty obvious, really.
Okay, and Ate?
I agree with what everyone has said, especially you got to vote on your own principle. And at the end of the day, you got to live with yourself, with what you voted for. I still believe there is time for making an appeal for people who's never voted or who just thinking, I don't know who to vote for. And especially those who've never voted, just making up well over 5%. Please go and vote. And also a vote for minor parties is not a wasted vote. It may shift things from Labour and National. There is opportunity there to shift things instead of just continuing with Labour and National. Thank you.
Okay. Let's just check a couple of comments here. TJ says, don't rely on a poll that is rigged to nudge people to vote the outcome they expect. Actually, in fairness, a lot of those polls were pretty accurate back 3 years ago and even 6 years ago. So they do give an indication, but you're right. They always have a margin of error. That's basic science of polling. Rosemary says, at this stage, based on the polling, I'm not comfortable voting for a party polling at 1 or 2. There's too much at stake this time around. Michael's got his cheerleader squad to come in, and Renee says, yep, 100% Michael. Well done, Michael. You've obviously been texting while you've been off camera. Ronnie says, I'm old enough to remember Labour and National freaking out when MMP was introduced. I can remember that. Melanie says, the Electoral Commission are considering lowering the threshold to 3%. I did a survey about this recently. I wholeheartedly support that idea. Yeah, it's going to be the politicians who make that decision, and I don't know if they're that keen on it. Tanya says, so how do we get rid of the left and the right? Can we get rid of Labour and National altogether? Stuart says, is this a replay? No, Stuart, it's definitely us. It's the 9th of October and it's 1 minute to 9. And John says, exactly, Bob. So under a 5% vote for a minor party goes to one of the parties who got seats. Team, we are just about out of time, but Cherie, you have got great reception right now. So I'd like you to just quickly tell us what you were telling us. You got about Israel, because it's a good point for us to leave focusing on something that is actually possibly more important than elections, to be honest. And you'd got to the point where your phone was beeping, you were hearing about all these attacks, you saw the evidence of families under attack in Israel, and you were just commenting on the political response and maybe how we can respond as well.
Yeah, well, maybe what I'll comment on, because it's sort of connected to a lot of what we have been talking about, is that last week we talked about, or somebody asked the question, why should we care about Israel? And I think this gives an example of why it's important that we understand what's happening with Israel and, in fact, support Israel, because Israel is a tiny democracy in the Middle East that upholds values of liberty, of freedom, of humanitarianism. And the fight that they have experienced in the last 2 days is an ideology, it's a radical Islamist ideology that does not value life. They've gone and slaughtering people, children, old people. They've captured a grandmother who's a Holocaust survivor. She's in Gaza. They've been posting photos of her. It's barbaric. I could go on, but the treatment of people is barbaric. There's no value of human life. And so this is a clash between two ideologies, and we in New Zealand should understand that, and the international community has seen that and spoken out strongly. New Zealand was very slow to speak out on these fundamental principles, and it connects to what the government has been trying to push through with their so-called progressive ideology. And so I think that's something that we should really think about and take seriously.
Okay, well, we certainly pray for the people of Israel and what's going on in the Middle East, that's for sure. We certainly pray for peace. So we leave you with that prayer need. I just did want to show this message that came through because we have a lot of international audience. In fact, team, we had about 70,000 views of our interview with David Seymour, and the one with Winston, I think's getting close to 50. The one with the minor party leaders was about 30,000. So there's been phenomenal watching of these interviews. But Dorothy says, here's one, I haven't voted for over 15 years. I'm in Australia, but I want to. How do I do it? And Jenny has nicely put this little link, sorry to cover you guys, team, but it's elections.nz. We better get rid of that, Gordon, before we get in trouble for covering up Bruce's face. But yeah, go to elections.nz for our international audience. Okay, team, we will be back next Monday night. We will be reviewing what happened in the election, and we'll be seeing who is the most accurate political pundit. So that will be interesting. Might have a little prize for that. So thank you, Bruce, Michael, Brendan, Cherie, Ate. Great job as always. Pray that Christine recovers from her headache. And once again, congratulations to Joe and Allah for the wonderful arrival of little baby Samuel. So team, we will catch you next Monday night at 8 o'clock. As Michael said, don't forget to vote. It is a privilege. Have a great week.
Yeah.